Ladies and gentlemen, testing for sound quality and volume. We are standing by to begin. Good morning. Building resilient economies in the Americas and the Caribbean. Honorable Desmond McKenzie, Minister of Local Government and Rural Development. Honorable Homer Davis, State Minister in the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. Ms. Mami Mitsutori, Special Representative of the United Nations, Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and Head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Mr. Gary Conneal, United Nations Resident Coordinator to the Multi-Country Office in Jamaica. Ms. Kyla Gaynor, Youth Ambassador for the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management. Mayors of parish capitals, CEOs of municipal corporations, Joy Douglas, Chairman of the Board of ODPEM, parish disaster coordinators, donors, sponsors, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen all, good morning. Welcome to this, the opening ceremony for the 7th Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in the Americas and the Caribbean, RP21. We would like to ask you to stand for the playing of the National Anthem of Jamaica. Thank you. Please be seated. I now invite to the microphone to deliver the official welcome, the Honorable Desmond McKenzie, Minister of Local Government and Rural Development. Help me welcome him, please.
Thank you, Paula. Honorable Omar Davis, Minister of State in the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. Mami Mitsusuri, Special Representative of the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction. Local representatives of the UND in Jamaica, mayors, CEOs, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I warmly welcome you as we commence a range of critical conversations through this 7th regional platform for disaster risk reduction in the Americas and the Caribbean. While this is the 7th platform, the hosting of this event is historical. It is a first for Jamaica, both as a Caribbean country and as a small island developing state. This is encouraging for us as we continue to operate as the sub-regional focal point of SEDIMA. It is a great honor, and it marks an important acknowledgement of the role, the value, and the concerns of small island developing states in the context of disaster risk reduction. My great regret is that due to COVID-19, you are not all here to enjoy the unique Jamaican experience. The pandemic has prevented us from hosting the original planned event in July last year. However, we are here 1 year and 4 months later, demonstrating collectively our determination to overcome the effects of disaster in all its forms. There is much to be done to advance the implementation, monitoring, and review of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction through this regional platform. The reality of COVID-19 has not diminished the priority that disaster risk reduction must be in our budgetary and other governance processes. If we are all to build resilience in our economies and society, then as a nation, as a region, we must be committed to this task. The government of Jamaica recognizes the effects, policies, programs, and laws that focus on disaster risk reduction. The government will create the necessary financial management to help competing priorities that has to be addressed. We have therefore initiated specific and measurable programs, policies, legislations, such as the Disaster Risk Management Act, the Building Act, the Disaster Fund, and the major infrastructure development program to integrate disaster risk reduction into the national development of the country. We are all challenged to find the best and most suitable ways to reduce the imperatives of risk, identify risk reduction, preparedness, financial protection, and resilient reconstruction. This challenge is especially daunting for small island developing states, which are vulnerable to disasters. On an average, natural disaster cause damage equivalent to 2.1% of gross domestic product every year in these states. The Caribbean effects of recent legacy natural disasters continue to be strongly felt. These issues that confront us will be discussed over the next 2 days. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you joining virtually and those who are present here observing the disaster risk management protocols, I use this historical opportunity as the representative of the first English-speaking Caribbean small island developing state to host this platform to encourage you to give special recognition as we work to develop solutions as our economy and our social zones cry out for this kind of cooperation. I look forward to our full engagement in this regional platform, which will reflect our national and regional challenges, issues, and priorities. It will produce through our discussions the next step we will take as we work to develop and increase resilience in our economies and in our society. This will be a great and meaningful experience for the people of Jamaica, the Americas, and the Caribbean. Once again, I welcome you to this historic event being hosted by the government of Jamaica, supported by the people of the region. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Mackenzie. This RP21 is the only platform providing this dedicated space for dialogue on disaster risk reduction. And as such, it is important that we have the voice of the youth as a part of our deliberations. So help me welcome the Youth Ambassador for Jamaica's Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, Ms. Kyla Gaynor, to the microphone.
The Honorable Desmond Mackenzie, Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, the Honorable Homer Davis, State Minister in the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, His Worship, Senator Delroy Williams, Mayor of Kingston, Ms. Mami Mitsutori, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, Gary Connell, UN Resident Coordinator to the Multi-Country Office in Jamaica, to the donors and cooperation agencies, all media partners, youth representatives, and viewers on all social media platforms, good morning. Buenos dias, bonjour, bom dia. It is indeed an honor today to bring greetings from the 7th Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in the Americas and the Caribbean. My name is Kyla Gaynor. Youth Ambassador for the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM. And I am proud to bring you greetings from the youth of Jamaica and the rest of the region. The Youth Forum on Disaster Risk Reduction, DRR, under the theme Building Resilient Economies in the Americas and the Caribbean, brought together youthful minds from across the region. From the discussions and months of preparation and work, you hear a plethora of suggestions for the way forward. However, I ask that when the youth statement is read later on this week regarding matters on climate change, disasters, the COVID-19 pandemic, and socioeconomic factors, that you view it with a different mindset. Let us change our old mindset, which sees the information put forward here only as another set of valuable touchpoints from the brilliant minds of the young and to be archived for a future relic. Let us agree that with this new mindset, you will accept that our concerns are current, our concerns are pressing, and our concerns are rooted in the production of months of research, work, and planning. We believe that the added muscle in going forward and standing strong in this global fight is listening to the voice of the youth. Let us use one voice to secure a better way of life, for not just us as young people, but for all nations, even as we embrace our new norm in light of COVID. Policy and decision makers, participants, hear us, include us, depend on us, have faith in us. Know that we have been guided, trained, and educated, and can be trusted with the responsibility to lead our fellow youth, and by extension, all our people through this global pandemic. A famous man once said, "Youth combatants have been and was their best option for survival." In closing, let me reiterate, all hands on deck. Disaster risk reduction revised, enhanced, and proactive rather than reactive can become our best tool to navigate a more adaptable and functional future in our region and others. The youth have spoken. Listen to the voice of the youth. Thank you for your time.
And the youth have spoken. We have just listened to the voice of the youth. Thank you, Kyla Gaynor. Ladies and gentlemen, our function this morning is live from Kingston, Jamaica, but includes participation from persons around the world. And at this time, we will step to the virtual space where we have remarks from the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Ms. Alicia Barcena.
Let me start by thanking Mrs. Paula Ann Porter-Jones, Master of Ceremony. It is a pleasure to participate in the opening of the Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. I would like to acknowledge the Government of Jamaica, the UNDRR, and SEDEMA for organizing this important event. The Most Honorable Andrew Holness on his presidency and Prime Minister of Jamaica, Minister of Local Government Desmond McKenzie, Minister of Local Government and Rural Development of Jamaica, Mrs. Mami Misutori, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and the head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Mr. Raul Salazar, Chief of UNDRR, Regional Office for the Americas and the Caribbean, Mr. Gary Conneal, UN Resident Coordinator for Jamaica, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, and Turks and Caicos Islands, Mrs. Kyla Gaynor, Youth Ambassador of ODPM, Raul Salazar, UNDRR Regional Office for the Americas. Dear panelists and colleagues, The region is traversing a very perilous moment of great uncertainty. Unremitting structural problems such as poverty, inequality, exclusion, and the violation of rights are at risk of being intensified by emerging critical challenges. Migration, the digital divide, and climate change, compounded by the impacts of disasters, are increasing, more recurrent and varied in nature and origin. Latin America and the Caribbean is a highly exposed region. Devastating hurricanes buffet the Caribbean islands and the coasts of Central and North America. At the same time, prolonged droughts affect vast geographic areas of Central America, for example, the dry corridor and the southern cone. Although disasters have different impacts on different populations, groups, and territories, no one is immune from their ravages. The clearest proof of this is the health, social, and economic crisis caused by the coronavirus disease, COVID-19 pandemic. The biological disaster has led countries to adopt emergency measures that have had a profound impact on national economies, labor markets, and the general welfare of the population. Latin America and the Caribbean has been the hardest hit region in the developing world. As of October 2021, it accounted for 18.5 infections and 30% of deaths globally, despite just having 8.4% of the world's total population. The impacts are usually greater on the poorest because they are more likely to live in precarious housing, have informal jobs, and inadequate social protection. Post-disaster compensation policies and, in general, reconstruction are designed for the formal sectors, subsidies to homeowners or contributing workers. Disasters and the bureaucratic channels through which reconstruction is conducted amplify existing inequalities. This also happens with other vulnerable groups. More women die from natural disasters, and it's women and girls who are most affected by post-disaster violence and abuse in shelters. There are international guidelines and, in many cases, national regulations for the installations of temporary shelters, permanent shelters, which seek to minimize this situation. However, in practice, they are often not followed, and the failures exacerbate gender violence. Highlighting the situation of social exclusion in our societies, it is women from the lowest income households who suffer the most. Those who live in the most precarious housing, who are more likely to go to shelters after a disaster, and therefore are more vulnerable to violence. Likewise, many of the jobs generated in the recovery and reconstruction phase, such as collecting rubble or building infrastructure, have a clear bias in favor of men employment. Apart from the small islands of the Caribbean, a disaster is generally a local phenomenon with asymmetric territorial impacts. It can wipe out long-fought social and economic gains in communities which often go unnoticed in national-level indicators. I want to mention two recent examples of hydrometeorological disasters which are becoming more intense, and in both cases, ECLAC led post-disaster assessments. The disaster caused by Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas in 2019 had a strong impact in the islands of Abaco. The touristic heart of the country, the islands of New Providence, was not affected. The economic and social indicators of the country were marginally affected, but those of this part of the country were approximately 3.3% of the population lives. ECLAC assessed the impacts caused by hurricanes Eta and Iota in Honduras and in Guatemala. And I would like to refer to the case of Guatemala with a special emphasis on vulnerable indigenous peoples whose situation can be worsened by events of this type. The most affected department was Alta Verapaz, where 53.6% of the population lives in poverty, the highest rate nationwide. More than 90% of the population of that department is indigenous. The focus on vulnerable groups should highlight that of disaster risk reduction policies, should focus, by the way, on the human dimension. When we speak of resilient reconstruction, we should not only think about infrastructure, which must think of the goal to prevent disaster from causing people fall back to poverty because of this, and of course inequality. Beyond any economic consideration, it is an ethical imperative that not only is no one left behind, that in the reconstruction processes, the groups that had the greatest vulnerability have priority. The COVID-19 pandemic has made these objectives even more relevant today. The crisis also offers an opportunity to transform our reality in pursuit of sustainable development. This is why I thank you so much for inviting ECLAC in this wonderful opening ceremony.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barcena. The RP21 is hosted by the Government of Jamaica, but it's co-organized by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction and the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And so it is only fitting that at this time we hear from the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and Head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, Ms. Mami Mitsutori.
Barcena, Executive Secretary of ECLEC, Mr. Gary Connell, UN Resident Coordinator to the multi-country office in Jamaica, and not least, a wonderful Ms. Kyla Gaynor, Youth Ambassador. I would like to join Minister Mackenzie in welcoming all the participants and representatives of member states, local governments, civil society, the youth, community leaders, the private sector, and members of the science and technological community who are joining us virtually. We are so proud to co-organize this important regional platform with our wonderful host, Government of Jamaica, and with SEDIMA. This event is extremely special and important for the region. Not only is it the first time that a Caribbean government is hosting a regional platform, it is also the first time that an event of this kind takes place since the outbreak of the single disaster of the last 100 years, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has resulted in 1.5 million deaths across the region. While overall across the region, PAHO has warned of increased infection rates in the Caribbean, parts of Canada, Mexico, Bolivia, and Venezuela, underscoring the need to track and manage infections closely as vaccine rollout continues and the importance of ensuring pandemic preparedness is integrated into national disaster strategies across the region. The lessons learned during this global emergency will undoubtedly play a central role in the discussions and debates over the next days as we take stock of progress in the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction as the midterm review of the Sendai Framework gets underway. Latin America and the Caribbean is the region most affected by the pandemic in terms of not only mortality, but economy, jobs, and the impact on education. Against this backdrop, the region is also struggling to cope with the range of natural hazards that come with exposure to both the Atlantic and Pacific hurricane seasons and widespread seismic risk, which has resulted in a terrible earthquake in Haiti, killing over 2,000 people, and a volcanic eruption, which has severely disrupted life on St. Vincent and the Grenadines for months. In Colombia, hit by Hurricane Iota last year, more than 300,000 people were affected this year by floods, hurricane, force winds, and landslides in 11 departments, and much of Central America bore the brunt of Hurricane Eta. The region is proof positive of the dramatic rise in extreme weather events fueled by climate change. 9 of the 10 countries that have suffered the greatest economic losses compared to the size of their economies are in the Caribbean, and the region accounts for 53% of reported global economic losses due to climate-related disasters. This regional platform takes place just a few months after the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issuing its 6th assessment report described by the Secretary General as a code red for humanity. The region demonstrates how interconnected all spheres of human activity are and how important integration and inclusion are to achieve lasting relief from the risks which plague us in our daily lives and which spring from a deadly fusion of both natural and man-made hazards. It is a very appropriate moment for the Caribbean to be at the center of a regional platform. Jamaica has shown great progress in disaster risk reduction and resilience development. It has also played an important role in many previous regional and global platforms and also chaired the open-ended intergovernmental working group of indicators and terminology related to disaster risk reduction. Jamaica has become the first country in the world to fully commit to urban resilience, having enrolled all its 14 local governments in the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative. We'll delve into the possibilities for a resilient future. We will address how to protect the environment and communities, discuss challenges posed by human displacement, explore strategies to strengthen early warning systems, urban resilience in governance, and how to deal with multiple hazards. We will also present the Regional Assessment Report on Disaster Risk in Latin America and the Caribbean. This document its role as a major contributor to knowledge and understanding of disaster risk, particularly through the collection and analysis of empirical evidence from past disasters. The historical moment we are experiencing compels us to ensure that our discussions during this regional platform have a concrete impact in our decisions for the future. The platform will host an intergovernmental meeting on the Regional Action Plan for the implementation of the Sendai Framework, which is being updated in light of the important lessons learned from the pandemic. Prior to the platform, we held 2 extremely important meetings, the Youth Forum for Disaster Risk Reduction and the Arise Forum for Americas in the Caribbean for the private sector. Combined, these events gave us the opportunity to map out a better partnership strategy that will serve as a basis for the key discussions taking place during these 4 days. It's also a pleasure to note the recently created Latin America and Caribbean Network of Women for Disaster Risk Reduction. While the creation of this network was supported by UN Women, the Global Network of Civil Society Organizations for Disaster Reduction, and UNDRR, the network itself is an initiative by and for women and girls across the region, with a growing membership of around 800 women. This network will highlight their role as leaders of transformative change. I look forward to seeing how it develops and thank them for their inspiring ambition. Likewise, I would like to extend my gratitude to the members of the Latin America and Caribbean Disability Inclusive DRR Network for their remarkable support in ensuring the full participation of people with disabilities in this and previous regional platforms. I'm confident that the outcome of the different discussions, as well as the ministerial declaration, will help us establish the roadmap towards a resilient future based on risk-informed decisions. Once again, my gratitude to the government of Jamaica, as well as to SIDEMA, for persevering with the organization of this regional platform. The realization of the regional platform is a great example, of international cooperation, and indeed the world needs to act together if we are to find solutions to the planetary crisis that we are facing, including the pandemic and the climate emergency. I thank you very much and wish us all a wonderfully productive regional platform.
Ms. Mami Mitsutori. Ladies and gentlemen, as host, Jamaica has not only provided an anchor, a location for the event, but is also providing an infusion of our culture at this time. Can we welcome, please, the world-acclaimed University Singers.
Me trust the Lord and me learn how to pray and me work hard as me is able and just to put to me near my each day. Me start out life with little buying and selling. It grows fast, how long it couldn't stop. And from that small and humble beginning, I move right up to own my own shop. One thing leads to another, so when faith and courage is done, me just look over my shoulder, see where me coming from, and I find the strength to press on. The shop it stretch and take in the post office. And Bishop people turn out Mrs. Smith here. And very soon I became the choir mistress. And lead the choir singing loud and clear. And soon was lending money like a banker to even those who don't have me them friend. But I just thank God and praise my Savior, who blessed me that I have money to lend. One thing leads to another, so when faith and courage is done, me just look over my shoulder, see where me coming from, and I find the strength to press on. And all the blessings that reach me, I share them. The shop back turned into one big Jamal class. So from shopkeeper, put Mrs. and banker, I am big teacher, I'm moving up fast. Believe me, one thing leads to another, and it is favor who to see. But I am very, very proud to tell you that last week I was with the GP. One thing leads to another, so when faith and courage is done, me just look over my shoulder, see where me coming from, and I find the strength to press on. So I am happy, I am never complaining, for when I've opened up before me a door, I just thank God as I try to pass through it, for that door leads me to many more. And day by day me just a spread out and prosper, right here for this very spot. And I just thank God for his guidance, and I thank him for all that I got. One thing leads to another, so when faith and courage is gone, me just look over my shoulder, see where me coming from, and I find the strength to press on. One thing leads to another, so when faith and courage is gone, me just look over my shoulder, see where me coming from, and I find the strength to press on.
The University Singers. This is the first time that the Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in the Americas and the Caribbean is being hosted by a Caribbean country. And so it is an extreme pleasure to introduce at this time the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, with his message.
I feel a tremendous sense of optimism as I welcome you to this 7th regional platform for disaster risk reduction in the Americas and the Caribbean. In hosting what is now a virtual gathering, we are already demonstrating the indispensable qualities of determination and partnership as we live and work through the most pressing disaster of our time, COVID-19. When Jamaica accepted the invitation to be the host of this platform in June 2018, no one knew that the pandemic was on the horizon. The original plans for this event, which would have involved all of you being here in Jamaica in July last year, were disrupted by COVID-19. However, through our collective efforts, including those of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction and the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, we're all here today, 16 months later, ready to advance the implementation, monitoring, and review of the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction through this regional platform. This is a particularly special occasion with historic responsibilities, as it is the first time that Jamaica, an English-speaking, small island developing state in the Caribbean, has been asked to be the host. This is encouraging and motivating for us as we continue our function as a sub-regional focal point for SIDEMA. At the national level, Jamaica has improved policy and legislative mechanisms to strengthen preparation capacity, as well as to increase responsiveness to disasters. Our network of disaster coordinators, public and private sector institutions, as well as ministries, departments, and agencies that operate in partnership through the National Disaster Risk Management Council, as well as the Disaster Risk Management Act under which it falls, have been indispensable to our strategic and tactical approaches to disasters. In addition to the traditional challenges caused by hurricanes, storms, and droughts, the Disaster Risk Management Act has been the primary tool through which Jamaica's evolving response to COVID-19 is being implemented. This law has strongly facilitated Jamaica's ability to adapt with speed and flexibility to the changing patterns of the pandemic. Over 1.5 million lives in Latin America and the Caribbean have been lost to COVID-19. Over 45 million people in this region have been confirmed as having the disease. We're all trying to recover from the economic fallout it has caused, which was estimated at 7% for this region in 2020. As devastating as the pandemic has been, it has also provided perhaps the ultimate stress test of all our disaster risk management capabilities. It has highlighted that economic growth and development and the deepening and widening of social services that our citizens expect are tightly bound to programs and policies that make disaster risk reduction a reality. I'm sure that we will be fully engaged in this regional platform. We will reflect our national and regional challenges, issues, and priorities. We look forward to robust discussions and tangible outcomes from this platform as we work to develop and increase resilience in our economies and societies. In this regard, I am particularly happy about the expansion of the traditional agenda to include the concerns of emerging groups that are uniquely affected by disasters. We therefore welcome the contributions that will be made by interest groups and non-governmental organizations which represent the young people, the physically challenged, and indigenous communities, among others. Though we will not be able to share the same physical space, I welcome you warmly to Jamaica, and I know that this regional platform will be a great and meaningful experience for the people of Jamaica, of the Americas, and of the Caribbean. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the final of our presentations for our closing ceremony this morning. We'd like to thank you for joining, for being with us. We will be having a break after this. I think there is a coffee break for those of you in person, a quick break for those of you online. And when we come back, Dr. Terry Carell Griffiths will be hosting the remainder of today's sessions and discussions. I would just like to leave with a quotation from the Honorable Desmond McKenzie as I share these words. It is my hope, too, that the forum will raise awareness not just for Jamaica, but for the region as a whole, as we have a real platform for expressing our positions on disaster risk and all associated issues, and that we will together find the solutions. Thank you. Again, I'm Paula Ann Porter-Jones.